Okay, hopefully everyone sees my PowerPoint. So I decided to do this presentation kind of for popular demand, I guess you might say. In many of our meetups, people would always ask a lot of questions whenever I-Ching came up about how the divination was done, how it was interpreted, all kinds of really wonderful questions that we normally didn't have time to answer. So here we go. Hopefully this, after today, that you will have a deeper level of understanding of the divination. So I'll break it down into three main segments of this presentation. First is the 5 W's, the who, where, when, how, why, and of the I Ching divination. And then we'll get into actually a couple of historical accounts of how this was actually used. And then we'll open up for a free discussion. So our friend who likes to draw genitals.
So do you know who is the person?
I don't know if it was like the person before. The person knew how to hijack various people's accounts.
No, you cannot name. Okay, so Joe probably better. Let me, Joe, I will make you a co-host so you can probably.
Yeah.
Joe is the expert.
Meanwhile, I'll just keep going.
We just keep going. Yeah, we'll take care of
it. Well, this poses a problem. All righty. So let's go to the beginning, so to say. So way, we don't know how long ago, but probably according to legend, maybe about 5,000 years ago, there were two legendary figures, Nua and Fuji. They were, depending on which version of the legend that you read, they were sisters and brothers, or wife and husband, or some accounts even say they were both. And so they were also only, at least in body form, only half human. The upper bodies were human and the lower bodies were snail-like or reptile-like. And these were important origins figures in the Chinese culture. So Nua saved Earth by mending heaven. And Fuji invented many things, including music, domestication, and also the 8 Trigrams, which is really the earliest origin of I Ching, or the Book of Changes. So according to legend, he spent a lot of time observing nature around him and patterns of nature. And he finally summarized the insights that he gained from observations of nature into 8 symbols. And this is what we know today as Bagua, or the 8 Trigrams. So these symbols comprise each one of 3 lines, either contiguous lines or broken lines. And the contiguous lines represent Yang, or sometimes translated as a positive energy. And the broken lines represent Yin, or the opposing negative energy. And this positive and negative are not judgmental in that sense. It's just the existence of two poles in the universe. it's not like positive is good or negative is bad. And so this is also, Jason has talked about before, there's a mathematical one-to-one correspondence with the binary number system. One might represent the broken lines yin as 0 and contiguous lines as 1. And actually, if you see it that way, from the right to left, it actually goes from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through to 7. But that's a mathematical aside. So later, by combining 2 pairs of trigrams, you can get 64 different possible combinations. And this become the 64 hexagrams on which the Book of Changes is based. So some interesting sidebars. The German polymath Gottfried Leibniz greatly admired the philosophies of Yi Jing. And in his invention of the binary number system, he was actually greatly inspired by the Yi Jing. And of course, all of our digital technology today is ultimately based on the binary number system in this computation. And another famous person in the West was Carl Jung, was deeply influenced by the Yi Jing philosophy in formulating his synchronicity concept. And there's another uncanny coincidental correlation here is in biology, specifically in genetics. So as we know, the DNA and RNA, the encoding, chemical encoding in that genetical code is based on 4 nucleobases. And you can draw a one-to-one correspondence of the 4 bases with the 4 bigrams. So the bigrams are, I should say, another view of the progression from in Yi Jing philosophy is first you have the Taiji, which is kind of a boundless vastness. And from the Taiji is born out of the Taiji is the yin and yang. So the negative and the positive. And then if you combine yin and yang into symbols of 2 bars, 2 lines, then you get 4 combinations. And these are called the 4 phenomena or 四象. And then taking it to the next level, when you have 3 lines, that's where you get the 8 trigrams. And of course, if you progress all the way to the 6 lines, that would be 2 to the 6th power, and there's 64 combinations. So this 4 nucleotides, you can draw a one-to-one correspondence with the 4 phenomena. And you can view the hexagrams of combinations of 3, each one with 3 of these 4 phenomena. And in genetic coding, there's a one-to-one correspondence where the sequences, actually the encoding of amino acids is on sequences of 3 nucleotides, producing 64 possible combinations. And it's these triplet sequences, which 64 possible combinations, which have one-to-one correspondence to the 64 hexagrams that includes all the 20 amino acids. That's the building block of all proteins and of course all life as we know it. So these are just some interesting sidebars. And so let's get back to our main topic here. So what is Yi Jing and who wrote it? Well, Yi Jing, basically, if I have to summarize it in one sentence, it's a book for interpreting the hexagrams, both symbol by symbol and line by line. So there, for each symbol, there are texts interpreting the meaning, imparting meaning, philosophical and metaphysical meaning to each symbol. And then under each symbol, for each line, each symbol has 6 lines. Each line also have text imparting interpretations upon each line. So originally, at least we know that at least 3 different versions of these interpretation books, oracle books, if you will, existed. There's a Lianshan Yi, where you might translate it as connected mountain. And there's Guicang Yi, return to hiding Yi. And there's also Zhou Yi. So only Zhou Yi survives today. The other 2, we only know them by name. We have no idea what the content is. So today when we talk about Yi Jing, so Yi Jing or I-Ching or Yi Jing or Zhou Yi, they're all synonymous. They all point to the same book. So what does Zhou Yi mean? So Zhou is the name of a feudal state. Originally it was a feudal state in Western China, and then later its leader overthrew the previous dynasty and established its own dynasty, also named Zhou. And Yi, now that Yi is the name of this whole concept. And in Chinese, this word Yi means, as a verb, it means change, or as a verb or as a noun, it means change. And as an adjective, it means easy. So that's, in a nutshell, that's supposed to be the philosophy of Yi. It's about changes and it's also easy. Now the easy part is actually harder to understand. And so who wrote it? Well, at least according to our legends, what the Confucianists say that it was King Wen of Zhou who wrote Zhou Yi. He wrote this while he was still a count of the feudal state of Zhou, and he was imprisoned by the king of Shang Dynasty. So his boss imprisoned him because his boss was worried that he was getting too strong and might become a threat. So while he was in prison, I guess he had a lot of time and he wrote this book. Later, after he was freed, he and his son King Wu of Zhou overthrew the Shang Dynasty and established their own dynasty, the Zhou Dynasty. And so that was an original edition of this book, but later Confucius and his students added a lot of appendices and commentaries, the so-called 10 wings, that elaborated on the philosophical and moral interpretations. So a lot of people say that it really was the 10 wings Confucius who transformed Yi Jing from an oracle book, divination book, into a philosophical book. But others believe that it was a philosophical book all along. So what was it used for? So it was used for when one has a major dilemma, that you have choices in front of you, but you cannot decide which one to go with. This will become clear in later parts of this presentation when we get more concrete. And this was also not the only method. There was another divination method that was also very dominant in very ancient China, was the turtle shell divination. So basically in that practice, that's a lost art. I don't think we know the details of how that's done or how to do it. But basically you take turtle shells or sometimes animal bones and you put it subjected to high temperature. And from the crack pattern, one somehow foretells what the auspicious, what the omen is. So to illustrate that you're only supposed to use this divination when you can't decide on something. Okay, when you already have options. It's not just like, oh, everyday business, every decision you have to make, you consult the divination first. That's not the case. So as a kind of a dramatic example, I found in the old book of Tang, which is a history book recording of the Tang Dynasty history about 1400 years ago. So when Emperor Taizong of Tang Dynasty was still a prince, he understood that his two brothers had ill intentions. He consulted General Zhang Gongjing on how to protect himself, and the two saw eye to eye. By the time when the prince was about to launch an attack on his two brothers, he summoned a diviner to scorch turtle shell. General Zhang at that moment entered the room, abruptly threw the stuff onto the ground and said, "Divination with turtle or yarrow stalks," which refers to the Yi Jing type of divination, "is always for settling the unsettled or resolving the unresolved. Today's matter has no doubt. What is there to divinate? Even if we get an inauspicious omen, the shi," that's a Chinese word. I roughly translate it as situational energy. "The shi is unstoppable. I wish your excellency will consider." The prince deeply agreed with his statement. Later, the general and 9 others hunkered at the Xuanwu gate, waiting to ambush the Prince brothers. This is actually the lead up to one of the most famous historical events in Chinese history, the Xuanwu Gate coup, where the 2 other princes were killed and Taizong became emperor and actually became widely considered one of the greatest emperors in Chinese history. But of course, he didn't really like to talk much about how he initially got the throne. So I find this a pretty dramatic story. You can imagine, right? The prince was, sitting in the room with a diviner. They've bathed themselves and ate no meat for the entire day, cleansed themselves, got into a quiet room, sitting there with incense burning, meditating, getting connected with nature and the spirits. And at that moment, this General Zhang barges in, grabs the stuff and tosses it on the ground and said, "What the hell are you doing? Stop pussyfooting and no more divinations. Let's get on with this. We got some assassination to do." And there you go. So, but my point here is what he said here. Divination is always for settling the unsettled or resolving the unresolved. So that was just one example from a later time. But what was the original instruction from how you're supposed to consult this divination? So this is from a much older book, from the Book of Documents. And this particular chapter was written close to 3,000 years ago, probably 2,700, 2,800 years ago, perhaps. So it says, when you have doubts about any great matter, consult with your own mind. Consult with your high ministers and officers. Consult with the common people. Consult the turtle shell and divining stalks. So again, stalks is using Yi Jing. If you, the shell, the stalks, the ministers and officers, and the common people all agree about the course, this is what is called a great accord. And the result will be the welfare of your person and good fortune to your descendants. If you, the shell, and the stocks agree, while the ministers and officers and the common people oppose, the result will be fortunate. So basically, if your own heart and the divination agree, but other people disagree, then you should still go with your own heart, and you should get a fortunate result. If the ministers and officers with the shell and stocks agree, while you and the common people oppose, the result will be fortunate. If the common people, the shell, and the stocks agree, while you with the ministers and officers oppose, the result will be fortunate. If you and the shell agree, while the stocks with the ministers and officers and the common people oppose, internal operations will be fortunate and external undertaking unlucky. When the shell and stocks are both opposed to the views of men, there will be good fortune in being still, basically taking no action, and active operations will be unlucky. So anyway, there's no point in getting into these details of these instructions. The main point here is that according to the original, very ancient instructions, there are 5 factors that you should take into account when you have a major dilemma. That's your own heart, the 2 divination techniques, your top advisors, your ministers, and also everyone else, the common people. So who performed these divinations? Well, of course, basically anybody can, anybody who knows how to do it. But when it comes to the top level of state power for a king or emperor, it is under the grand historian's purview. And during the Zhou Dynasty, which was really the period, Zhou Dynasty lasted 800 years, and this was really the height of this Yi Jing divination. The grand historian was a very powerful position with very broad purview. Job descriptions include recording of state events, authoring or editorship of historical records, curating imperial libraries, astronomy, and maintaining and creating accurate calendars, court rites, and divination. Now let's get into the more scientific aspects of this job description. Astronomy and accuracy of predicting celestial natural phenomena through the calendar almanac was a sign of whether or not the ruler was truly the son of heaven and had the mandate of heaven. So this is really of fundamental importance to the ruling power, and whether or not the son of heaven was perceived to be legitimate. So if you're the grand historian, you better get this right. So the ideal grand historian was an astronomer, mathematician, historian, walking encyclopedia, and an excellent writer. More or less, the ideal one was a polymath. And part of the grand historian's oath was to record and speak the truth, even at the sacrifice of his own life. And the famous historian Summa Chen was a good example. So let's talk about Summa Chen for a little bit, because really we're gonna see the diviners has great power in this divination process. So it's very important to understand who the diviner was. it's as important as we wouldn't understand that we can't understand the divination without understanding this. So Summa Chen wrote the famous Records of the Grand Historian, which is the most influential book of Chinese history. He was also, even today, considered one of the greatest prose writers in all of Chinese history. He was a philosopher, and in his life, once upon a time, he drew upon the ire of the emperor and was castrated by the emperor for speaking against all other court officials in the defense of a general that surrendered to the Mongols. So he certainly lived up to his oath of making a sacrifice to speak to power. So I want to talk a little bit of his scientific accomplishments, which is much less widely known than his other accomplishments. He was the chief creator of the Tai Chu calendar, and this really was a major milestone. In preparation to creating this new calendar, he led a team that constructed new instruments and conducted extensive astronomical observations. And this is around 100 BC. He also commissioned 20 mathematicians from across China to conduct the necessary computations. And he also collected and studied and compared more than 10 existing calendars at that time. And the major advancements offered by the Tai Chu calendar include, here just a couple of it really had a lot of accomplishments. Here are just a couple of the ones that I chose. Accurate determination of planet-solar conjunction periods. So you see the table to the right, the 5 known planets at that time, their periods of conjunction with the sun were all determined to extremely high accuracy. Most of them in the 99.9 something percent level. So I just want to point out that despite the antiquity, we normally don't think of people doing science until after Newton. This was really truly a rigorous scientific investigation that entails making refutable predictions and testing them with empirical observations. And this another accomplishment was the determination or discovery of the occurrence frequency of solar and lunar eclipses, that there are 1 to 3 solar or lunar eclipses during any period of 135 lunar months. And this changed society in some ways. It started to dispel many of the superstitious beliefs regarding eclipses when people understood that these were actually regular deterministic phenomena. So the mini summary here, we've already gone through a lot of stuff. That as we will see later, the diviner wields great influence in deciding the divination result. And at the highest level of state power, the diviner is often a historian, philosopher, scientist, one of the top advisors, a knowledgeable advisor. So how do we do this? You know, if we want to sit at home and do this, what's the recipe? So actually, to make this a little more interesting, will someone pose a question, a dilemma that you want help in deciding, and then we'll go through this. I'll give you a minute. Hopefully we have someone who's not shy. And, it can be anything. Maybe you went to, you don't know if you should buy from the grocery store chicken or bacon today. I see Anne perhaps speaking, but I don't hear her. Are folks able to unmute?
Can you hear me?
You can.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so I'm able to unmute.
Oh, great, Hugh. Do you have a dilemma? Hey, here's one. Whether you should stay in this meeting or log off and do something more interesting.
Yes, let's use that one.
Okay. Should I stay or should I go? All right, perfect. All right. So here's the original text from one of the 10 wings of Yi Jing, perhaps written by Confucius, but maybe by his student. I just want to point out, we're going to talk a lot about the yarrow sticks. And on the upper right corner is a picture of the yarrow plant. So the Yi Jing said, the numbers of the great development is 50, of which only 49 are used. The yarrow stalks representing these are divided into 2 heaps to represent the 2 emblematic lines, yin and yang. One is then taken from the heap on the right and placed between the little finger, the pinky, and the ring finger, that there may thus be symbolized the 3 powers of heaven, earth, and human. The heaps on both sides are manipulated by force, so you count them off by force, to represent the 4 seasons, and then the remainders are returned and placed between the middle finger and the index finger on the left hand to represent the intercalary month. In 5 years, there are 2 intercalations, and therefore there are 2 operations. And afterwards, the whole process is repeated. The numbers required for qian, which represents the positive, the yang, amount to 260, and those for kun, which represents yin, to 144. Together, they're 360, corresponding to the days of the year. The number produced by the lines in the 2 parts amount to 11,520, corresponding to the number of all things. Therefore, by means of the 4 operations is the yi completed. It takes 18 changes to form a hexagram. The formation of the 8 trigrams constitutes the small completion. If we led on the diagrams and expanded them, if we prolonged each by the addition of the proper lines, then all the events possible under heaven might have their representation. The diagrams make manifest by their appended explanations the ways of good and ill fortune, and show virtuous actions in their spiritual relations. In this way, by consulting them, we may receive an answer to our doubts, and we may also, by means of them, assist the spiritual power in its agency in nature and providence. The master said, this refers to Confucius, he who knows the method of change and transformation may be said to know what is done by that spiritual power. Okay, so there's this is very dense here. There's a lot of stuff packed in. We're not going to get into today all the metaphysical meanings of the different numbers, 144 to 16. We're just going to focus on the recipe. All right, so let me decipher this for us all. So here's a step by step. First, you start with 50 yarrow stalks. You set aside 1 and keep the remaining 49. And then you just arbitrarily divide them into 2 piles. And you take one stalk out of the pile from the left-hand side and hang it on your hand. And then you count that pile by fours. So basically you're dividing it by 4. And hang, and you're gonna have some leftovers. That leftovers gotta be either 1, 2, 3, or 4. And you hang those leftovers on your hand again. And then you count now the right-hand side pile also by 4s. And then you take the remainders and hang it on your hand. And then by this point, you've completed the first transformation. And you count, you sum up how many stalks you have on your hand. Now, just so the arithmetics work out, that answer is always going to be either 5 or 9. So whoever invented all this is quite clever with numbers. And then you write down that number. And then you take what's left in the heap. That's got to be either 40 or 44. And then you go back to dividing them by the piles, hanging one on your hand, counting each pile off by 4s, taking the remainders, putting them on your hand. And then that's transformation 2. That transformation 2, the answer is always either 4 or 8. And then you do this again. Transformation 3, again, the answer must be either 4 or 8. And then you add up all the numbers that you've written down, those 3 numbers from the 3 transformations. And then you subtract it from the number 49. All right? So as the number will work out, that answer, there are only 4 possibilities: 36, 32, 28, or 24. Okay, then you go to this lookup table I put together. Each one corresponds to one of the 4 phenomena symbols. And from the 4, so depending on which one you have, let's say we got 24, all right? So that means you got the old yin phenomena, which means for that, the first line, so after 3 transformations, you determine just one line of the hexagram. And so that means, oh, the first line is a broken line. And also there's another thing that's important. This line is subject to change. And there are all other possibilities, the middle ones, the yang yin and yang yang, where there is not going to be subject. The old yang. So basically, when you're old, you should change. Don't stay stiff. Okay, don't. We should be more open to change when we get older. And well, that's my interpretation. So 3 transformations give you 1 line. So to determine all 6 lines, you need to do this 18 times, 18 transformations. So just for fun, as I was putting together this talk, I went through, as you can see, this is a very tedious process. It's not something you can do with this drop of the time. And I got 36, 28, 24, 36, 36, 24. So long story short, these correspond to this stack of 6 lines. And then each line, whether or not you're supposed to subject to change or not. So you see, 5 out of these 6 are subject to change. What does that mean? That means you generate a secondary hexagram. The ones where you're supposed to change, you flip it. So if it's continuous, you change the broken. If it's broken, you change the continuous. But the one that doesn't change remains the same. And then so you get 2 hexagrams, okay? So the first one is Dui, which means marsh, represents marsh. And the second one is this one called Gu. Gu is actually related to a very ancient practice of voodooism. It's the character actually represents a bunch of insects in a container. We will get into that another day if you want to hear about it. I can tell you about this. It's kind of voodoo. And so it's called the source I looked at in Wikipedia translated as correcting. So also the thing about ones that change is that these are the important positions that you're supposed to consider in your decision. So, okay, now we've arrived at the answer. So let's, okay, so remember now, like, unfortunately, this is hard to interpret the results we have. Okay, so first of all, we have two different symbols we got. So that's already two things we need to consider. And each one, we need to consider 5 different positions. So that's like at least 10, 5 plus 5 is 10. There are 10 different possible answers. And we need to tease out which one is most applicable to our situation. So so let's look at what we got here. I have the links to the Wikipedia translation, or not CText translation, so we can take a look and see if decide we should stay in this virtual meeting or not. You know, maybe there's something better awaiting us. So,
Pink, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Sorry, I think the method you describe here, I'd like to know where you got the, I'm not trying to challenge you, but I just want to know where you got this information, you know. I know this, heard about this, but I don't know what's the original text that describe the method to do it.
So the original text is from Xi Ci Shang Zhuan.
Xi Ci Shang Zhuan has the detailed description of the step-by-step.
Well, okay, so this is the original text of the Xi Ci Shang Zhuan. Very, very brief, right?
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, yeah, it's so concise that it did need, but there are other people like many scholars in the Han Dynasty who, based on this, wrote down more elaborate explanations. Yeah.
So basically, Han Dynasty, the people have more step based on this. They have more.
Well, it's the same steps, but they wrote down more elaborate explanations.
Okay.
So that today we can actually, you know, this one it's too brief. There's a lot of gaps in there. Yeah. If you already know how to do it, you read this, it makes sense. But if you didn't know how to do it, you're not going to learn.
Yeah, I'm just curious, how can anybody read this? And
yeah, well, I had to consult 2 modern books that you know, even the Han Dynasty ones, it's a bit hard for us to, you know, regular people these days. So that's basically that, and then translate into Baihua, right? And then some examples. Even in Baihua, in plain language, it was still hard to understand. I couldn't really get all the details. And then luckily, between the two and the examples, you know, putting 2 and 2 together, you figure it out. So let me take a time check. Well, it's almost 5. So, well, we'll take a quick look. I was going to skip the interpretation, but I think I may need to, when I get the share, I probably need to stop and share my screen instead of the PowerPoint. So let me do that. All right, so let's look at our primary trigram. So 对 intimates that under its conditions, there will be progress and attainment. but it will be advantageous to be firm and correct. Okay, that's nice, but it doesn't really help me decide whether to stay or go. And then I'm gonna skip, for the sake of time, I'm gonna skip all, some of this stuff. So, oh, okay, this is important. So this is Confucius wrote, the two symbols representing, so this hexagram is a combination of the trigram for water and the trigram for marsh. Is one over the other. The superior man, in accordance with this, encourages the conversation of friends and the stimulus of their common practice. So I think it's tipping toward that, maybe you want to consider staying with us. That's how I take it. You can differ. But,
no, I'm gonna go with your suggestion.
And so we have 5 out of the 6 positions that we should pay attention to. So the first one is undivided shows the pleasure of inward harmony. There will be good fortune. All right. And then let me peek back, which were the positions. Okay, position 2 is not important, so we'll skip it. And then we'll look at 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right. And so position 3, divided shows the subject bringing round himself whatever can give pleasure. There will be evil. Not sure what that means. I'm not a polymath, so I can't interpret all of it. But the ones that don't apply, basically you can reject. Okay, this is then position 5 shows its subject deliberating about what to seek his pleasure in and not at the rest. He borders on what would be injurious, and there will be cause for joy. And the next one, position 5, shows its subject trusting in one who would injure him. The situation's perilous. And finally, position 6 shows the pleasure of its subject in leading and attracting others. So these different positions, basically, you have to think about your situation and decide which one applies in your situation, right? Let's say, right now I might take a look and say, well, for the moment, I'm leading this presentation. So maybe this number 6 is the applicable one. And I need to show the pleasure of the subject and making this presentation attractive to others. Right. And you as a listener, you may say, oh, that one doesn't really apply. I'm going to look at one of these other ones to help my decision. All right. So, and then after this, okay, now we've only gone through the first hexagram. We're not done yet. And what was the second one? Let's go with the second one real quick. So the second one, you get the point. You look at the overall interpretation of the hexagram. You look at the different positions to see what situation might be applicable. And then you have to consider all that and draw a conclusion as to what the advice is. So the main point here is all this is very, very interpretive, okay? It's not like what we think of divination, that you deal out some cards or something, and then boom, you get an answer, to stay or not to stay. This whole thing is really a thinking process. Forcing you to first get yourself in a very calm state, You know, don't eat meat, bathe yourself, cleanse your soul, sit down in the quiet room. And then it makes you look at your circumstance from different perspectives, different kinds of consideration, and consulting the text. And then somehow you arrive at a decision. And I'm glad that somehow I've hoodwinked Hugh into staying. So.
Sure thing, sure thing.
Okay, now we've.
So Pin, do you want to take some question now before you go to the?
Yeah, great idea, great idea.
Is Kate has a question? I think you have a question. Do you want to ask?
Hi, sorry, you're talking to me?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was asking, so is that result like applied to each individual questions, or each time you get different results? Because I really don't understand how you get that result. Right?
Yeah, so each time you come up with a question, you take the sticks and you perform this it's really a computation. You perform this computation with the sticks, and you arrive at these hexagrams, and then you read the text corresponding to the hexagrams, and then you in your mind, you decide what those hexagrams are telling you as far as what you need to be doing. Does that answer the question? So each time you get a different answer.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, my question is how do you use a like app, or you use anything to get the hexagrams? Like how to get that?
Well, you need to have 50 sticks of this plant.
Oh, you use the real sticks to
Yeah.
get result. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you need to have 50 sticks, and then you, as the instruction here says, you take 49 of them, you divide into different piles. So this, well, keep in mind, this was invented at least 3,000 years ago. They didn't have apps, so this is how it was done. Today, yeah, you know, probably people have written apps, but if you're a true believer, you may say, well, an app is not the right way to do it. So you might not get the right answer.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Joe has a question.
I have a quick question. What's the difference between sticks and coins? Like in making decisions?
Oh, that's each individual's opinion. If one is a purist, one would say the coin is improper because it's money. It's not very spiritual. So the original, when you think about when this was invented, there wasn't, I don't think there was coins yet.
Okay,
Coins were invented later.
There was
So
something
coin
like
is a more modern, I think, more convenient way to do it. Easier, it's faster.
okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just wondering, if this a whole process is about to actually find out what you want in your heart, like it doesn't really mean anything, but it's like because you keep calm and you think about what you want, and finally when you interpret the results, you actually realized what you want. That's all it's about.
It's all up to whatever you think. yeah, I everyone have their own take on this, right? So I tend to think it's basically a clever way to help people sit down and think about a situation calmly, and like you said, the answer is already in your heart. But you know, it's helpful to go through this as a thinking process and sit down and look at things from different perspectives, calm your mind, and that'll help you make the best decision that you can. That's my take. But hey, there are many people who believe that this actually has some spiritual significance, and who am I to say that they're right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, someone mentioned the corn. I know when I do that kind of things, normally when I'm waiting for the result, I already know like which side I wish I get. So yeah, I guess that's all about to find out what you really want.
Well, the difference between this and the coin and flipping a coin is flipping the coin does not involve the process of going to a book and read and being forced to consider your situation and reading some fairly vague philosophical advice. But you know what that is it makes you think. It makes you sit down and really think about the situation for yourself. Flipping a coin doesn't help you in that way.
Yeah, because that makes sense. Thank you.
But I'll confess, I've actually never, I've never done this. I'm too impatient. To go through this 18. Even for today's example, yeah, I went through the first transformation honestly, and then after that, yeah, I basically just randomly generated, you know, basically flipping a coin and generated the other numbers. So I cheated. Jason, sorry, there's too many things on my screen, so I can't see the hands up and stuff.
Okay.
So, are there any other questions?
Yeah,
May I add something? This is Jeff. I'm not on camera, but I took a very extensive class 40 years ago, 1980. You probably weren't born then. 1980, using the Yarrow sticks. And if your question, I had a lot of success using. I've been rusty for quite some time. That's why I plugged into your class tonight, I found though it to be a very intuitive tool. If your question is very specific and your mind is in the right place, I don't find it to be an experiment with a thinking mind at all. I find it as a very intuitive tool. If you ask a very specific question and you let go and you be just open, I found the response I was getting, and I have several books of interpretation. I happen to like the Wilhelm Bain's book, and I like the John Blofield book, 2 books. And one of them was published in 1950, and the other one's published in 1968. The Blofield book's 1968. And those are probably the ones you'll find the most in this country, especially the Wilhelm Bain's book. It's been around, it's everywhere. I mean, you go in a used bookstore, they've got 5 or 10 of them because, you know, like I said, it was published in 1950. But it's all the frame of mind that you go in there with, and if your question is very specific, and I found it very intuitive, and I got very good answers whenever I asked questions in that manner. And I've tried it both ways, and you have to, once you get to use the sticks, you still have to give yourself approximately an hour to go through the process. The coins are very quick, and I didn't find them nearly as accurate myself. And I prefer the sticks. I much prefer the sticks.
Yes,
Anyway,
yes.
thank you
so much
hosting
for
this up.
thank you so much for sharing that, and you know, first-hand experience, and in real life, and also for the references. Really appreciate it.
Well, to learn the Yarrow sticks is it's not difficult, but it's something you have to practice, because you know it's not something. It's not like just throwing coins. It's throwing the coins you can pick up in, you know, reading a book and pick it up in 15, 20 minutes. Maybe to really get it where you realize that this is an intuitive tool that is speaking to my inner nature. Right? I mean, I'm really intuiting this.
Well, I totally agree. You know, that's part of the reason why I haven't done this, because people always, oh, you can just use coins. To me, if I'm gonna try it, I'm gonna do it the right way. I'm not gonna cheapen the process by using some coins. So
I would encourage you to get to know the Yarrow sticks, and then come back and do a course on application.
Well, I would invite you to do that.
I'm very rational. It's been many years now since I like to get back into it, and I'm that's why I'm here tonight.
Yeah, that would be wonderful if you could, you know, come back and edify us on that. Yeah. Okay, so I think there are two more hands, right?
Madeline and me. So Madeline.
Okay, yeah. Go ahead, Jason, and then Madeline.
No, I just want to quick share, like, you know, the ways doing this to the compromise. You know, don't go to coin is too simple, and if you don't trust the app, and you don't want to go to pins way, it's just like write the 64 stick, and each one write a number, and then you just like doing this and pick one, and then you check the book and see which one you got, and just read it. If you understand, then it gives you some hint. So that's the compromise way to do it. Just write this one. I think that would be easier if you want to do it. So, you know, just my suggestion.
Thank you, Jason.
Madeline.
Yeah, thank you, Pin. This is great. Really wonderful. As I'm looking at this, especially the description of all the different stages to go through with the gathering things and holding them between your fingers, I can see how Confucius would have loved this and why he would have written those 10 wings, because he was so high on ritual, and he really felt that, I'm just going to blabber on for a second. He really felt that ritual held society together. And that people observing the proper forms kind of kept everything going and kept people in unison. And since this was, you know, fairly old even in his time, and old was always traditional, which was always good in ancient China, this would be right up his alley, especially since it has such a strong haptic or mimetic element to it. So in other words, like just like rituals of preparing food or caring for the dead, this was something that you would do with your whole body. And he also really, really liked that. And it does create a lot of entrainment in group. Even if people are doing the I-Ching ritual separately, if everyone is doing it in the same way, there is some level of group cohesion going on. So yeah, so I can see Confucius loving this.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with everything you said, and definitely. And personally, yeah, for that reason, I personally actually believe the process that with the Yarrow sticks that requires, as Jeff said, about an hour, is actually an important ingredient in this whole process. It's kind of like cooking. You know, if you want good food, it takes a while to cook it. Fast food doesn't taste that good. So, okay, so here's the final section. I was glad that Jeff shared some, you know, modern day example of the use of the application. So now I'll draw upon a very important history book called Zuo Zhuan that was written around 2,500 years ago by a contemporary of Confucius. And in there, there's actually many stories about the application of I Jing divinations, and we will look at just 3 of them. So, yeah, these are kind of long. Bear with me. I'll read each one and maybe give a little bit of summary of what the main point is. So, Duke Li of Chen was the son of a daughter of the House of Cai. In consequence, the people of Cai put to death Wu Fu and raised him to the marquisate. He begat Jin Zong, during whose boyhood there came one of the historiographers of Zhou. So this is a grand historian of Zhou to see the Marquis of Qian, having with him the Zhou Yi. So here you see, here's a court historian as he travels, he carries the Yi Jing with him because this is really part of his profession. The Marquis made him consulted by the milfoil, I think here it's the same as Yarrow, on the future of the boy. When he found the diagram Guan, this is Guan is the lower left here, and then by the change of manipulation, the diagram P, which is the one on the right side here. So that's the process, right? With the change, you get the second one. Here, he said, is the deliverance. We behold the light of the state. This is auspicious for one to be the king's guest. So basically, he is citing the text from Yi Jing corresponding to the 4th line of the symbol. Shall this boy in his generation possess the state of Chen, or if he do not possess this state, does it mean that he shall possess another? So it's saying, right, the Duke has a newborn boy, and doing divination to see if this is auspicious or not. And here's the question, is this going to be the successor, or maybe now the diviners posing another possibility, maybe this boy will actually go to another state and take over another state? Or is this the thing foretold not of his own person, but of his descendants? Here's another possibility, maybe it's the descendant. The light is far off, and its brightness appears reflected from something else. This is an interpretation of the symbol. Kun represents the earth, so he's talking about the bottom part of both symbols. Xun, the top part of the diagram, Guan, so this is the top part of the left-hand symbol, is wind. And Qian, heaven, so that's the upper part of the other symbol. Xun becoming Qian over earth represents mountains. Thus, the boy has all the treasures of mountains and is shone on by the light of heaven. He will dwell above the earth. Hence, it is said, we behold the light of the state. Again, he's quoting from the book. This is auspicious for him to be the king's guest. A king's guest fills the royal courtyard with the display of all the productions of his state and the offerings of gems and silks, all excellent things of heaven and earth. Hence it is said, it is auspicious for him to be the king's guest. But there is still that word, behold, and therefore I say, the thing perhaps is to be hereafter. And the wind moves and appears upon the earth. Therefore, I say it is to be perhaps in another state. If it be in another state, it must be in that of Jiang. And Jiang. For the Jiang are the descendants of the Grand Mountain, Yao's chief minister. But the mountains stand up as it were the mates of heaven. There cannot be two things equally great. As Chen says, Chen decays, this boy will flourish. When Chen received its first great blow in BC 533, Chen Huan, the representative of Gongzi Wang in the 5th generation, had begun to be great in Qi. When it finally perished in 477 BC, the officer Chen was directing the government of that state. Okay, anyway, let me just summarize real quick. So basically the diviner's prediction was that this boy will have good fortune, but it won't come till later. And he's gonna have to leave his home state of Chen to another state before luck strikes him, and he will eventually be effectively the ruler of another state. And just it turns out in actual history that is what happened. The boy grew up, was forced out of his own country, I think, due to political strife. He went to Qi, and Chen is a small state, so eventually Chen decayed and probably ceased to exist, maybe taken over by someone else. And Qi was a very powerful state, and he actually became the equivalent of the prime minister of Qi. So the main point here is that you see the power of the diviner, right? He is pulling out all kinds of stuff. He's pulling out interpretations of what kind of landscape or natural phenomena these symbols represent, and what does it mean when the wind is above the mountain, and this and that, and also the historical connotations of the ancient sage king, and the surnames of certain rulers of states. I mean, the diviner is doing all of this and coming up with an answer. So it's really, really important who the diviner was. You know, a lot of the information is pulled in and synthesized by the diviner. You can call it BSing, you can call it amazing clairvoyance, or whatever you want to say. I'm not going to argue with you. So it's really, I see it really as a way for the ruler to consult a knowledgeable advisor, and in some way it's a limit and balance to absolute power. These rulers were monarchs, and but here is a compelling reason why they would be willingly to consult someone else. And this person is supposed to, the ruler, at least in the ancient times, believed that there was a higher spiritual power that the diviner is speaking to. So I think under those systems, perhaps this was a useful check and balance on absolute power. But that's just my perspective. So a second story is it starts with the end result. Wu Jiang, who was a noble woman, I think maybe she was like a queen, died in the Eastern Palace. When she first went into it, she consulted the Yarrow and got the second line of the diagram, gun. That's the symbol on the lower left. The diviner said, this is what remains when gun becomes sui. So again, the change symbol is sui. Sui is a symbol of getting out. Your ladyship will soon get out from this. She replied. So basically, this was, the diviner said this was auspicious. You're being under house arrest in the East Palace, and you're going to get out of this soon. She replied, no. Of this diagram, it is said in the Zhou Yi, sui indicates being great, penetrating, beneficial, firmly correct, without blame. Know that greatness is the lofty distinction of the person. That penetration is the assemblage of excellences. That beneficialness is the harmony of all righteousness. That firm correctness is the stem of all affairs. The person who is entirely virtuous is sufficient to take the presidency of others. Admirable virtue is sufficient to secure an agreement with all propriety. Beneficialness to things is sufficient to effect a harmony of all righteousness. Firm correctness is sufficient to manage all affairs. But these things must not be in semblance merely. It is only thus that sui could bring the assurance of blamelessness. No, I, a woman, and associated with disorder. Basically, I think she had an improper affair with someone. I'm here in the palace, in the place of inferior rank, chargeable moreover with a want of virtue. Greatness cannot be predicated of me, not having contributed to the quiet of the state. Penetration cannot be predicated of me. Having brought harm to myself by my own doings, beneficialness cannot be predicated of me. Having left my proper place for a bad intrigue, firm correctness cannot be predicated of me. To one who has those four virtues, the diagram sui belongs. What have I to do with it? To whom none of them belongs. Having chosen evil, how can I be without blame? I shall die here. I shall never get out. So I picked this one just as an example where the diviner came up with an interpretation, and the client actually opposed it and drew a totally opposite conclusion and stuck with that. So my point here is this kind of divination is highly, very flexible. Okay, here's our last story, and then I will stop yapping. When Nanquai was about to revolt, a man of the same village was acquainted with his purpose and passed by him. Sighing as he did so, he also said, alas, alas, a case of difficulty and hazard. His thoughts are deep and his plans are shallow. Circumscribed is his position, and his aims are far-reaching. The servant of a family, his schemes affect the ruler. Such a man there he is. So basically, someone was seeming to call out on his secret revulsion plan. Nanquai consulted by some twigs about his object, without mentioning it, and got the diagram Kun, which then became B, as it is said upon the changed line. So here, only one line changed. So this was simpler to interpret. There was only one answer that they had to focus on. Yellow for the lower garment, great good for fortune. He thought this was very lucky, sounded good, says good fortune, and showed it to Zifu Huibo, saying, if I'm contemplating something, how does this indicate it will turn out? Huibo replied, I have learned this. If the theme be one of loyalty and good faith, you may go forward with it. If it be not, it will be defeated. The elder figure indicates strength and the inner mildness, expressive of loyalty. We have also harmony leading on solidity, expressive of fidelity. So he's talking about water being harmony and the earth symbol being solidity. Hence the words, yellow for the lower garment, greatness and good fortune. But yellow is the color of the center. The lower garment is the ornament of that which is beneath. That greatness is the height of goodness. If the center, equivalent to the heart, there is not, so if the heart doesn't have loyalty, there cannot be the color of yellow. If below, i.e. inferior, there be not the respectful discharge of duty, there cannot be the ornament. If the affair be not good, there cannot be that height. An earnest nourishing of the three virtues makes that goodness. Where there are not these three virtues, this diagram does not apply. Moreover, the Yi, so the I Ching, cannot be a guide about anything hazardous. What things are you contemplating that should require that ornamenting? With that is admirable in the center, you can predict the yellow or predicate the yellow. With what is admirable above, you can predicate that great goodness. With what is admirable below, you can predicate that lower garment. Given these three all complete, and you may consult the reeds, or the yarrow. If they are defective, though the consultation may seem to be lucky, it is not to be acted on. Basically, the main point here, the diviner is saying the divination does not overrule moral and ethical values. Those things rule over divination. So if you don't satisfy those things, the divination is not applicable. In that way, it's somewhat similar to the story with the previous story. Okay, hopefully I helped everyone understand this whole thing a bit more and did some demystifying as opposed to perhaps confusing even more. But I am done, and let's open for discussion. Thank you very much.
Madeline has a question.
Yeah, I was interested in we'll just stick with the last one of these, but in the general complexity of them. So there are the changing lines. I can't remember how the changing lines are determined during the throwing, so perhaps you could go over that again. So there are the changing lines, which then change the trigram and the hexagram. So you end up doing two readings. Then there's the color symbolism. Then there's the symbolism of the position. The center, I believe, also can represent like the midsummer part of the year or the central fifth point of the compass. And then the above with its connotations of Chen, and below with the connotations of earth. So it's that, just even that last one slide was incredibly dense. And perhaps you could just sort of go over what those different things meant. So we could get a sense of having followed one complicated story, because I realized that these are great examples and they really show like what it was like to try to do a reading with all these variables going on and different symbols of color and position and meanings of things, and also drawing probably upon famous past interpretations of the trigrams and hexagrams.
Yeah. Great question. I will try my best. So the changing is basically after you go through what's called the sequence of 3 transformations. So each transformation is the dividing of the stars and counting them by the 4s and so on and so forth. And after you do all that, you get a number. And the number is one of these 4 numbers. It's just how the arithmetic works out. If you actually sit down and think about it, you can prove it mathematically. And so each one of these corresponds to one of the 4 phenomena, one of the 4 bigrams. And their names is old, young, young, yin, young, yang, and old yin. So basically yin and yang, but for each one, there's an old and a young. So wherever you wind up with the old, that's the one that's subject to change. So in the example that we did, I went through the 6 times 3 movements, and I got these symbols. And then it just turns out these 5 lines were subject to change. So I'll use the first one as an example. The first round, I got the number 36. There were 36, and then that corresponds to the old young. So that means you get a young symbol, but you need to change it. So to generate the secondary hexagram, I changed that. So from a yang line to a yin to a broken line. So basically, you do this 6 times. So that's how you arrive. And the ones that change are the ones that are the important ones that you should consult. So in this story, they got these 2 symbols. So this one is Kun. So you notice this is a pure symbol. Every single position is the yin, the yin symbol. So this is Kun, which represents earth, or negative, or darkness, shade, the moon, for example. So also and then the secondary one is this one. So from this, it's obvious that in their divination process, only one line had to be changed, which is the second one from the top. So then they say, okay, so let's go to Kun and then look at what it says for this position, for this line. So, okay, so let's do that. And so the 5th position, it says, the yellow lower garment, there will be good fortune. So the nobleman mainly saw good fortune. Okay, good, I'm happy. And he didn't really go into any depth in interpreting this. And then when he went to his minister, and that person went into a lot of interpretations. So this is what does this mean? This is very yellow, basically something like yellow skirt, great good fortune. And years ago, when I studied a particular book on Yi Jing, at least that author interpreted as this position corresponds to right after the full moon. Oftentimes, when we look at the moon the day after the full moon, the moon is still full and it's yellowish. So this is the natural phenomenon that this is pointing to. And well, let's read the minister's interpretations. So he's saying the outer figure indicates strength. The inner mildness. And sorry, I had to move things around to read my own chart. You know, here it's not clear to me which diagram he's referring to, but if he's referring to the one on the right, the outer symbol is water, the lower symbol is earth. Maybe, I'm not sure. Maybe he's saying water represents strength and the earth represents mildness, because the earth is the moon, which is compared to the sun, is a very mild power. It's powerful, but it's mild. And he's saying that's loyalty. And we also have harmony leading on solidity, expressive of fidelity. So I think he's here, I believe he's talking about this symbol again. There's water represents harmony, and the earth represents solidity. And this means fidelity when you have harmony among people, and there's also solidity. That is a symbol of fidelity among people. So he's saying, hence the words, yellow from the lower garment, greatness of good fortune. So he's saying when you want to obtain this good fortune, these elements have to be present. And so the lower garment is, I think here he's saying, representing the client's position, who is a servant, and that's supposed to be like a skirt, a yellow skirt. Yellow also, represents earth, and mildness and solidity. So you're supposed to be loyal and serving the good and protect your boss. And this is where the goodness comes from. So let's see. But yellow is the color of the center. The lower garment is the ornament of that which is beneath. So I think yellow is the color of the center. Of course, I'm kind of, these are all I'm trying to interpret this is that from observing the sun is yellow, and also the moon in this phenomenon we're referring to is a full moon that is yellow. So these are the sun and the moon are very centrally are very central things in the natural world. So this is why he's saying yellow is the color of the center. And the lower garment is the ornament of that which is beneath. So the lower garment is worn by someone who is a servant class. That greatness is the height of goodness. So basically, in your case, in your position, your greatness is your goodness is measured by how good a servant and protector you are. And if in the center, so now it's talking about the heart, there is not loyalty, there cannot be the color. And if below, there be not respectful discharge of duty, there cannot be the ornament. So that's a very common concept in interpretation of Yi Jing, is that the nature of things have to fit the circumstance. And if there's a mismatch, then a good thing could be bad, a bad thing could be good. So in this case, I think this minister obviously already heard rumors about what about this secret plan for revolt. So basically, he's getting there. You know, he's saying your plans is not fitting of your circumstance. And so this is actually an ominous omen for you. And so that is where he starts to elaborate on ethics, virtues. Basically, you don't have the required 3 elements that behind this, what the Yi Jing says, those are the essence of this good prediction. And you don't have that. And then he goes even further saying, you know, actually in your case, forget the I Ching or divination, because you're doing something bad and nothing can help you. So that's anyway, that's my best attempt in deciphering this.
Well, Kevin has a question. Kevin, you want to say something?
Yeah.
You are muted, Kevin.
Let me change my sound. Come back.
Okay, before we, okay, so actually that's a lot. I just like to share, you know, it's I have attended like Yi Jing seminar. Okay, hosted in the Bay Area. My friend invited me to join, and they are, you know, in the Bay Area. My friend, most of them are doing the high-tech computer, working for Apple, you know, this kind of company. So they have a group, and a lot of people believe it. And then when I joined, they talk about one Guo, okay, because that represent this year, which is Wei Ji, I believe, the number 63. And then the seminar is like very, very detailed, go all the like 3 hours, and they still cannot finish. So they go the whole thing and everything step by step, very, very detail oriented. So I don't have the patience to through, but because I just want to share, you know, how much you can go. And all these seminars, I'm not going to tell you you should believe it or you should not believe. And I just want to share that's what's happening here. And then it's if you don't believe, just don't believe. If you believe, you don't have to change. But I believe Pin also agrees with me. It's what it is. That's our attitude. And then if you say that's great, that's great. If you say that's nonsense, then that's nonsense. That's fine. Yeah.
Thank you, Jason.
Kevin, are you ready?
Yes, I think now better, right?
Yeah, right now.
I hear my own voice noisy just now. I got so many questions, but first, thank you for a great presentation. It's hard work, man, but you did it. And my question is, I would say I need a general idea about the first one, for the last one you shared about the last one. Why you change that line? If you base the interpretation is great fortune, right? Great fortune, which means you don't need to change. Why you change that line in for interpreter? So you don't need an answer, but that's my question. And follow that 36. The first one you see, where's that 36 come from? Maybe we can do next session or do some demo for yellow stick. Sure. And the following is, so how do you make a decision? Why is that line change? So that's very different for me. Right? Today I'm lesson learned for me. It's a psychological interactive communication between the the zero and then you do some solution. It's a good exercise. Normally people do things, okay, I'll make my decision. It's especially binary. Okay, that's the right decision. You never think back. That's like, if you think through, okay, you be cautious do things. Thank you.
Yeah, Kevin, thank you. Yeah, I agree with you about the, but I didn't quite understand your question. So you said why
they change that line, right? It's called 6-5, right? It's our
right.
basic interpretation is good fortune.
Right.
Yeah,
And
then better interpreter bases that they say they need only that's good. That means you made that, by the way, deviation could make you bad or good. That means you change something for bad. Yeah.
Well, yeah. The Zuo Zhuan was written by, well, we don't know for sure, but according to conventional history, that's written by Zuo Qiumin. Zuo Qiumin, he was one of the few people. He was a contemporary with Confucius, and Confucius, I think, twice in the Analects said how much he respected Zuo Qiumin. So Zuo Qiumin probably was a Confucianist or something. So he wrote this this Zuo Zhuan, the history book. So he probably wrote it to express, right, promote certain moral values, and also there's a lot of stories about divination, and I think I haven't gone through all of them, but basically a great majority of them, the divination prediction was exactly right. And so there's a common saying that Zuo Zhuan recorded a lot of 怪力乱神. So we have to read these stories with that lens, perhaps, that this was written by a single person, and this person may have some kind of a moral agenda to the book. So the story was maybe expressing a moral lesson, right? The moral conduct overrules everything else. Agree,
yeah. By the last one, that's why some people think, okay, I don't want to do that divine, because it's going to make me like in back of my mind, I have something to do. Because either or sometimes still eventually going to, I don't want those predictions affect my action. Literally suspicious. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Basically, he was gonna go kill somebody, and the divination say, good fortune, and of course the minister was like, no, stop. Okay, Anne. Madeline?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, I'm willing to I just got lost in that one interpretive moment. It was, Kevin, were you referring to the third narrative, the one where he's going to do a revolution? Is that the one you were referring to where the ambiguous phrase is inserted that
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Explain.
And so that's a widely
broken
familiar,
line. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
6 broken line. They picked the fifth 6, change it to the solid line.
6
However,
broken
basically
lines are not what it was, right? It's not 6 broken
that's about
lines.
to change,
That's
right?
incorrect.
Yeah.
What?
It's
The
about
B?
it's about to change. Why they change that line? Lots of questions. However, you know, that's good. You know, ping basically 2 different reference. One reference should not change. It's good. Another saying, oh yeah, basically, you know, some ritual or something, virtue aspect, you need to change something and that line. For me, why you make decision that line and why you change that way? That's good. Thank you.
Okay,
Well,
but
that line
what's the
was-
difference between the kun and the B? Is that what we're talking about?
Well, I think Kevin is saying, if you look at the omen from face value, it was saying, basically saying it's good fortune. Whatever you're thinking, you know, it's good. Your plan action. So the client, you know, the said, oh, great, you know, that's my answer. And then he went and talked to somebody else.
Oh, so
And
it's the
that other-
second narrative we're talking about. Which narrative are we talking about? We were given
The
3.
final one, the final one.
Okay, thank
about
you.
The
And
revolt.
it's a she that was the one who was going to be the. Oh, okay. I guess I'm confused. Can you recap, please?
This is about the one.
Ping, maybe you can bring chart back then, you know, so
Yeah. This is about a person who was secretly planning a revolt.
Yes, I remember.
And yeah,
That's the third narrative. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So.
And the kun became the B, and I don't understand what B is. Is it
Right.
by? How do you pronounce it?
B.
Okay.
by the B sort of compare.
Yeah, B is compare, to compare. So the omen that he got from Kun. And okay, so why this line changed from broken to solid, that's from the computation. So from their computation, for only this position required a change. So and also, yeah, and also means that.
Oh, got you. I understand.
Right.
That.
Also, that also means this is the only position that's important. So he looked at the text for this position, and it says something pretty cryptic, but it says yellow for the lower garment, great good fortune. So he said, oh, well, great fortune. That means I should proceed with my revolt. But he also showed it to a friend. But the friend had a totally different interpretation, basically saying you're doing something bad. And this is only good fortune if you are being a good servant, but you're doing something bad, so this doesn't apply. So that's the essence of it. So Kevin is saying that I think that, at face value, it just said that it was good. And then this other person comes in and applies a lot of his own logic and draws the opposite conclusion. So
yeah, well, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Right. No, that's it.
And I think that's too, for a Western audience or a person here sitting in California who this is not familiar with all this, I'd like you to go back to your diagram, please. And to point out, the cone is a set of 3 lines, correct? Indicating, I forgot, Earth. Is that right? Okay, so we agree on that. The B then the kun changes to a B because there's a snapping of one of the twigs, and we don't know how that
Right.
happens. Isn't that right? You agree with that? And the B is that correct? And in the text, it says, which next became. Somehow, some force acted upon the twigs that were formerly kun to create the B.
Well, the changes from when you think of the stocks as an abacus, you're just using as a kind of a computer. So at the end, if the computation gives you a number of either 36, which is that gives you the straight line, but it also means that you need to change it. And if you get a 24, that's a broken line, but you need to change it. So what happens is they get the 6 stages of computation, and one of them showed up as a 24, and that means they need to change that symbol.
Okay, we have Madeline, and we over time, but let's extend for like 10 minutes, but not too long. Okay.
I'm sorry, Pin, you misspeak. Let me you misspeak. That graph was used earlier to suggest that what you do is you create 2 separate gua, and you change your lines entirely there in each of the 4 cycles to create a contrasting or a mirror image of the original, not a mirror, an inexact. You earlier suggested that what you would do is you would have the original table and then you flip it about and examine it in the alternate perspective. Isn't that right? Did I not follow you in that?
The flipping is only where you get one of these numbers, and that's the only sign that only line that you flip.
So in each of the 4 cycles, as you described earlier, yeah, you would change the broken into the, yeah. Okay, so you may have misspoken earlier. I perhaps don't quite get it.
Well, at the very least, I didn't explain very well.
But you sort of said
in the example that I did, got 36, so that's a straight line, and it requires a change. And
that's
I got
correct.
28. 28 means straight line and no change, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
So then whether from this change or no change produces the second symbol.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Then that might be my misunderstanding then, I think, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I
Thank
guess.
you.
Okay,
I mean, I guess it's my misunderstanding. I'll look into it more deeply.
Thank you. We have a lot of technical questions. So, Madeline, please.
I did also, Jason, want to follow up with you. And my original question related to the fact that you say you have a lot of friends in Silicon Valley who use this system. Are they using it for crass? I don't want to suggest you would have friends who would use it for crass predictions of how they're performing in the stock market or anything like that. But that would not be an appropriate use. And so you would therefore disagree entirely if they were using it for these
Okay, so
financial purposes. Huh?
Yeah, that's a deep save our personal opinion to the last. Okay, we have Joe and Madeline.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, that's a non-answer. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So
I guess it's a yes.
what's that? Okay, let's go to Madeline, Joe, and Kevin. Remember, we have another 10 minutes. So.
Okay, I will keep this brief. Thank you, Pin. That was amazing. It was really wonderful to hear you go through the entire 3rd thing like that. It really gave a sense of the incredible complexity of the interpretation. And that, when you sit down, like not you personally, but when someone sits down with 3 coins and tosses them to say, like, should I go to the grocery store today or tomorrow? They're really not getting the most out of the I-Ching. And also they're not training their mind and their body and their soul to attune to it in such a way that they would get the most out of it when they really do need to ask a big, important question. And on the other hand, for those of us who are Western and not that familiar with the whole system, there is no angry, thundering God sitting up there who's going to punish you if you want to sit and use the I Ching for every little decision throughout your day. Should I wear the black socks or the brown socks? The I Ching, it's not going to happen that way. It's more like it's a waste of your time, and it's sort of like dishonoring something very large to keep using it for something trivial, but it's not going to come after you and punish you. And in fact, I don't know, it was just fascinating, and especially to see like how the different systems come together, like the binary of yin yang. Then there's the, I'll call it the possibility outcome. So there are actually 4 at least. So it's not quite like ternary, but it's got something going much more than binary, just in terms of what lines you get. There's the color symbolism, there's the elements symbolism, the positions. I mean, it's just fabulously complex. And I don't know, if I were a royal diviner and I wanted to advise the king, and I also wanted to not be beheaded, I would be very glad that there were so many different possible interpretations in there. So
Yeah.
thanks again, Pim. This was really just staggering to put this all together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great insights that you shared. Joe and then Kevin.
Yeah, so I also want to thank you. I mean, because this is incredibly complex, and this is one of the videos that I actually can go back and watch in order to just begin to learn. So this is my first exposure to I Ching. So thank you for that. And the one thing that, and I'm a little bit, maybe you can need a point of clarification, is the use of ethics as like what ethical system was actually used in order to, because you mentioned in the decision making that ethics trumps everything. And I remember you also mentioning how they would actually, in a way, crowdsource certain decisions through the minister, through the common people, and things like that. So what is the ethical system that underpins some of the decision making?
Yeah, well, because the Confucianists, Confucius and his students wrote the 10 Winds. So basically it's become Confucianist values.
Okay.
But I don't know, but the Yi Jing existed before Confucius. So, but unfortunately, it's kind of like the person who wrote the book has a say, The other people didn't write the, we don't have surviving text on them. So the only thing we have is the Confucianist ethical system. Well, in the I Ching.
Can I ask a quick follow-up to that? How did it influence the Taoism? How does it influence Taoism?
Yeah, Taoism is also very, I Ching is really like the mother of all schools of Chinese philosophy. The view of a changing world, I would say, that there are these prime forces that are opposing, and the world is always changing, and what looks good right now may not be good later. What looks bad right now may, there's no absolute, right? That's very much in Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi's philosophies, and also this naturalist view of the world.
Right.
Very much inheritance of Yi.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for both. That's what I thought it was. The naturalist view was the biggest influence. Thank you.
Kevin.
Yeah, I'm going to first, Joe, you hosted Dao De Jing, right? That's the first Dao can be spoken. It's not eternal Dao. Name can be named, not eternal name. So that's exactly, if you think about these two sorts. But I got my own question for Ping. Jason. It's was that 36 come from the process that you still how that that's a process like you quickly explain. Or second question, where's the match table? This 36 match to the so young. Yeah, if you can, that's two questions briefly, because for not just for myself, for audience. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, those numbers come from this procedure. So here, okay, I'll go through this. So first I started with a pile of 50, right? And then it says to take one out, and you only use the 49. So I have 49. And then I just randomly divided that pile into two piles. And one pile had 22, the other one had 27. They add up to 40. And then it said, take one stock from the pile on the left. So the left pile now only has 21. It says to hang that on your finger. So on the finger, now there's one. And then it says to count the left pile by fours. So I counted by 4, and basically, you count up to 20, and then you have one remainder. It says to put that one remainder, hang it on your hand again. So now I add another. I put that one, hang it on my finger, and then you count the right pile by 4s. So you count out 44 stocks, and there's still 3. I'm sorry. You count out 24 stocks, and now and there's a remainder of 3. So you hang that on your fingers. So now on your fingers there are 5 stocks, and you add that up. You write down this number 5, and then you have a total of 44 left. And then you go through this process. So that's transformation 1. And then you take the 44, you go back to step 3, you divide into 2 piles, and you do this computation again. So the next one I got was, I didn't write it in the table, but it was 4. And then I do it again. I got, I think 4 again. So I have 13. So yeah, then you add up the register number from the 3 movements, which is 5 plus 4 plus 4 is 13. So now you completed 3 transformations, and then you take that number, you subtract it from 49, and that's how you get the 36. So the 36, and you look up this, is old and young, and it means a solid line with change.
36 match old and young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how did I construct this table? Well, that's by consulting the ancient text, and I just, for convenience, I put it into a table. Yeah.
So do we have any other question or any comment? Before we go, Pien, you have anything to conclude for today? Or?
I just want to answer Anne's question real quick. She asked if it's okay to use this for stock trade. I don't see any reason that is not okay.
But we are not liable to take responsibility.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Do it at your own risk. Yeah, I'm not recommending you do it.
We should put a disclaimer like this one for purpose. Okay, so you are responsible for your gain, and well, we can
that's right.
For your gain, but not your loss. So that's important. So, any other question? But Pien, you have anything to say about this one or your next one? What you want to talk about? Probably, I assume it's the end of the next month.
Yeah, I don't know yet. So no.
Let me know. I assume you probably will talk about some Zhuangzi or something. Okay, we count on you.
So, okay, sorry, apologies to Anne. I think I misunderstood her question. She didn't ask about the stock trade.
Okay.
Apologies.
No question?
Apology accepted. I'm sorry. It's just the whole thing that I read just a little bit in advance by a very well-known translator who worked directly with the, but anyway, he said definitely it's very disrespectful to use it for trivial, to use this process. And I would never, suggest. In fact, that's what I was interested in identifying with you, Jason, and you deftly left me to conclude that your friends were what? Either, well, they're probably very ethical. They probably would not be sitting around a table talking about their business fortunes over using the Yi Jing, right?
Whatever,
So
many
let's-
way to, I just want to say there's a many way to use it. And what Pin talk about this one, most are used in the ancient royal court. And then I'm from Taiwan, and Taiwan has something called Xinbui, okay, the poi, okay, and that's a difficult thing, but they say it's much easier. So they ask for the daily life, okay, should I wear red socks or green socks? And should I buy this one? Are you happy on this one? This kind of simple question. I think Pin,
Okay,
so they have a simple way to do it. They have the
well,
way to do it. And the interpretation, they have the ethical interpretation, they have the divine interpretation, and they have the foretell interpretation. So that's, since that's the first thing in China. So all, when I say China, probably pan-Chinese, that's all rooted from this. So, very.
yes. I understand what you're suggesting, and I like what Madeline suggests too. There's no punishing God that stands over us that says, oh, you can't do this. But I understand about notions of respect, and I also understand the natural inclination. You're not going to use this system unless you're in a grave circumstances to, you're not going to decide the color of your socks based on this. You're not going to sit down and do this with your hands, and so on. So in that sense, I don't imagine that people just, if you're going to invest in particular stock or, you're going to try to use other means at your disposal. This would be for people who are really struggling, I would imagine.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you, Anne, for clarifying. I appreciate your point.
Okay, so Pin, so next week, basically, I'm glad Pin did this. And first, I probably not a lot. I just very appreciate how much work Pin put in, because I don't believe Pin put up the Zuo Zhuan, they have the English translation readily. So, and I look at the Chinese, it's hard to understand in Chinese and even harder to translate in English. And I really appreciate how, and I hope everybody understands how much work he has to put in. And then that's a very difficult job. And the next week, I'm going to do a much easier job. Basics related to this. I'm going to introduce in the 1st century, there's a guy called Yang Xiong, okay? He is another kind of Yi Jing, okay, which is not yin and yang, so-called heaven, earth, and the people. So that's a 3. So not a binary system, that's a 3. So total they have 81, okay? So he make another table on that. So that's another idea on that. So I'm not going to do the detail because I don't have this kind of brain capacity to go detail like Pin. But I'm going to just quickly show you how the different. If you are here today, you will appreciate the difference. Second thing, my opinion, Han Dynasty, which around the 1st century, probably the Chinese most superstitious time. People believe all this, and the guy. Wang Mang, he is the great Confucian scholar. He really used this kind of divination, yin-yang school, and then overturned the Han Dynasty and try to have a reformation, okay, to build Confucian's utopia, okay. So that's his work on that, but he only survived for 14 years and then he passed away. So that's the story. Next week we are going to talk. If you remember this week, so they will help you understand for the next week. Yeah. Thank you. So we have a
Thanks, everyone.
we
have questions. Yeah, I can stay.
Okay,
Some questions.
I still don't want to last for too long. So let's take two more question or comment for Kevin and Ed. Yeah.
I got a quick comment. Normally I would connect modern days, contemporary day. Like, for example, this one in Chinese tradition, we still, for wedding date, funeral, which day is the final, and even from some people for big event, they pick a date and find consider a professional doing this. Yeah, still believe. Another one is believe it, but not believe it blindly or whole or completely. So there's something makes sense for, it's like my own experience in my family, we still use this. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and you have the final words.
Yeah, I would just suggest, since I'm not in any way familiar with any of these scholars or what have you, these wonderful books and so on, when we make big verbal arcs over a span of history, we have to be, for somebody who's not that with it on all the large structural moments, we have to be slow and repetitious. For example, the Han Dynasty, as you'll recall, operated between such and such and such and such, focused strictly on blah, blah, blah. Then we move on to the blank, blank dynasty. Now they arc back, you have to be really repetitious, really slow for stupid folk like myself. I'm an initiate. I'm what we call, a kook. We use that term in surfing, surfing waves here in California. We're not, we get all like this and what have you. We're stupid. Some of us are stupid and we need a lot of help. And so if you could just go back and also just with the pronunciation, please, if you could just be real precise about, and repeat many times, because what if we want to learn about the nuances of the language? And it may well help some of the character, to hold up, even if you, and that book, earlier, Jason, Mr. Peng, you held it up. I couldn't see it and I kept going like this, but you have to, very slowly. I'm a child, essentially.
So
I'm an initiate, okay?
And I just want to tell you, it's on the meetup page, in the meetup group page, and we have required reading, and that's the we are talking about.
Yeah, just when you're stupid, you need extra help, and that's what I'm saying. Okay, it's not, I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying I'm stupid, and I'm going to need some extra help. I'm going to need people to be slow and deliberate and direct and simple and repetitious. I'm learning. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Everything you said are elements of good presentation. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, that's you. It was what? It was excellent. No criticism intended. It was very good. And I moved, and you've moved us very efficiently through the material. I thought that your May 28th creation was wonderful. I just loved it. Love it. Thank you.